Hi everyone, and welcome to a new video. This time we will look into how to run the latest version of macOS, which is Sequoia at the moment this video was created, in a virtual machine on a Windows-based PC. I'll go through the process step by step, and the goal is to get a running and workable virtual machine with macOS without the need for any real Apple hardware or pre-made ISO images. Once we manage to do this, I'll also check how well this actually performs and if it is usable for some daily tasks. I did cover the same in an earlier video for the previous version, Sonoma. In that video, I used the two-step process where we first had to install Catalina and then could upgrade to the desired version of macOS. That method still works perfectly today, also for Sequoia, but in the meanwhile, I found a better way to download the required BaseSystem.dmg image for newer macOS versions. This allows us to directly install the version of choice and saves you quite some time, disk space, and download volume. Having macOS running in a virtual machine allows you to experiment with this operating system without the need for any real Apple hardware. You can play around with different versions of the OS, get more familiar with it, test some Mac-exclusive software, but it can also be used to recover a broken system, test compatibility, or to create installation media, for example. As in the mentioned previous video, I will go again for VMware Workstation as the hypervisor, as I didn't manage to get newer macOS versions running stable on VirtualBox unfortunately, and Broadcom made this version of VMware Workstation free for personal use. For the video, I will be using my Intel NUC 12, which I reviewed in depth in the previous video in case you would be interested in that. This machine is equipped with an Intel Core i7-1260p and 32GB of memory. Lower specifications definitely should work as well, but do keep in mind that recent macOS versions are pretty resource hungry. Just so you would get an idea on how we will do this, I'll first cover the high-level steps. We'll start by downloading a Sequoia BaseSystem.dmg image by using a Python script that is bundled with the OpenCore package. Then we'll convert that image into something we can use in VMware Workstation, so a VMDK file. We will download and install that hypervisor then and unlock the ability to use it for virtual macOS machines, followed by the creation of that virtual machine and actual macOS installation. Once macOS is installed, I'll also install the VMware tools and set up file sharing for a much better experience. And finally, I will check how the performance is on this virtual machine with macOS. Let's dive right in and start by downloading the Sequoia BaseSystem.dmg file. As mentioned, this will be done by using a Python script, so before we can run that script, we need to install Python as a prerequisite first. Let me open my browser, go to python.org, download the latest version of the Python installer, and then install that. Now that we have Python, we can go ahead and download the latest version of OpenCore PKG from its GitHub page. To make things easier, I'll provide links for everything you need in the description. On the releases page, we can download the latest release of OpenCore. Then from your downloads folder, first extract all files, and open them and navigate to the utilities folder. In here, you can find a folder called Mac Recovery. Right-click on that and click on Open in Terminal. We will now use that utility to download the BaseSystem.dmg file for the macOS version we want to install. This is done by providing a specific board ID for which this version would be the latest supported version. You could look up these IDs yourself, but the OpenCore guide has a very handy list of all recent versions and matching IDs. So, in our case, and again, you can find links for this in the description, we want the latest version, which is Sequoia. So, we need to copy the last line in the list and then paste it in the Open Terminal window. After pressing enter, this will download that file which we are looking for from Apple and save it in a subfolder called com.apple.recovery.boot, as you can see. Unfortunately, we cannot use this image directly in VMware Workstation, but the good news is that we can convert it easily to a format which is supported. In order to do so, we will need another tool which is part of QEMU, so let's go ahead and download that first. The latest version here should be fine, but it seems like Windows doesn't really like it. Let's keep it anyway. And then, from the Downloads folder, we can install it. Back in the command prompt, let's go into the folder where the files got downloaded. And as you can see, this is where that BaseSystem.dmg file was placed. Now enter the following command. You can use tab to complete the paths to avoid any mistakes. And you can do the same for the file names. After a bit of patience, the result of this command should be a new file which is called BaseSystem.vmdk. Let's close the command prompt, move that VMDK file to the desktop, and then clean up everything else that we downloaded as we don't need it anymore at this stage. So, at this point, we have a bootable image that is usable by a virtual machine. That means it is time to download and install VMware Workstation from Broadcom. Again, you can find a link for this in the description, but you can also easily find it using a search on the internet. Scroll down a bit on this page and choose to download VMware Workstation Pro. Here, you will unfortunately need to log in with a Broadcom account. If you don't have one yet, you can just click on Login, Register here on the right top. I'll not go through that process in the video as it's pretty straightforward. Then, once you have an account, log in here using those credentials. Once logged in the available selection, choose for VMware Workstation Pro 17.0 for Windows and click on the latest release that is available. Now we can click here to download the installer. It might be required to still accept terms and conditions, but I already did that earlier. Also, after pressing the button, there is a possibility that more details will be asked, but just follow along. Okay, the installer is downloaded, so let's double-click it and continue to the installation of VMware Workstation. There we go, VMware Workstation is installed on our PC now, but as Apple does not allow running macOS on non-Apple hardware, VMware or Broadcom had to put in some restrictions that would allow that. Technically, the hypervisor is perfectly capable of running macOS, as you will see. Fortunately, it's not very hard to remove these restrictions. To do so, we will use another script or tool for which, once more, you can find a link in the description as well. Let's navigate to the Auto Unlocker GitHub page, go to the latest release on the right side of the page, and then download that latest release. And once downloaded, in our Downloads folder, we can extract the downloaded zip file and run the Unlocker executable from here. In here, all we need to do is to click on Patch and wait a bit. If all goes well, you should get a confirmation that the patch got installed successfully. Let's start VMware Workstation now and start creating the virtual machine to run macOS. In the center window, click on Create a new virtual machine, leave the type as typical, choose to install the operating system later, and as guest operating system, choose for Apple macOS. Set the version to macOS 15, which corresponds with Sequoia. You can change the virtual machine's name and location if desired, but I will leave these as default and click Next. Same for the size of the virtual disk that will be linked to the virtual machine. And then we can click Finish to create the VM. Before we can use it now, we'll still need to make a few changes. Let's start making those by clicking on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. In here we can begin with the memory size, which I will increase to 16 GB. This should be comfortable for both the guest running macOS and leave enough for Windows as I have 32 GB of RAM in this machine. 8 GB for macOS should work fine as well, but lower might come with a bit of a performance penalty. Then for the processor settings, I will increase the core count to 4. And we will also need to link that downloaded and converted BaseSystem VMDK file to this virtual machine, because that is where we will boot from the first time we start this virtual machine and which we will use to do the macOS installation. So click on Add, select Hard Disk as hardware type, leave the interface as SATA, and choose to use an existing virtual disk. Navigate to the location of the VMDK file. In my case, I moved it to the desktop earlier and select it. When asked to convert this image, just keep the existing format. Finally, I will also go to the virtual CD/DVD drive and deselect Connect that power on, as this machine doesn't have a physical drive, which would cause a small error message on boot. All done here, let's click OK to save these settings. Unfortunately, there is more that we need to change which is not supported from the graphical interface. To do that, we will need to manually edit the VMX file which contains all of the VM settings and configuration. We can see the location of that file on the bottom here, and easiest way to access it is by right-clicking on the VM's name and then go to Open VM Directory. This location contains all of the virtual machine's files, and the VMX file, which has type VMware Virtual Machine Configuration, is what we are looking for. Let's right-click on this one, go to Open With, choose another app, and choose for Notepad. In here, we need to change one value and add a few configuration statements. I'll include these in the description as well. I prepared these over here, so let me put these on the left and then the VMX file on the right. The first one, board id.reflectHost, needs to be changed to false. So let's search for it in the VMX file and change the value. The second one, Ethernet 0.virtualDef, is already set correctly, and the next 5 statements just need to be pasted on the bottom of the file. These basically configure a board ID, hardware model, and serial number which is required for macOS. You can play around with these values if you would plan to run different versions of macOS. In case you would have an AMD CPU instead of Intel like I do, you will also need to add these other 10 statements at the bottom of the file. At least that's what I saw in the comments on my previous video, as I unfortunately do not have an AMD-based system to test these. Alright, after adding and changing the required statements, we can save the VMX file, and then finally we can click on Power on the virtual machine. If all goes well, this should boot macOS recovery in the virtual machine. This is exactly how you would be installing macOS on real Mac hardware as well. After selecting the language, the first step we need to do is to prepare the virtual drive in a VM. So let's open Disk Utility to do so. In Disk Utility, click on View, Show All Devices, and then select the first drive in the left menu. You can double check that the size more or less matches to what we chose during the virtual machine creation. I left this to the default of 80 GB, which we can see here. Now we need to click on Erase, give the drive a name, and leave the format and scheme as they are. This shouldn't take long, and once complete, we can close Disk Utility. Finally, we can now choose for Reinstall macOS Sequoia here. Click Continue, accept the license terms, and then select the name which you gave to that virtual drive in Disk Utility and click on Continue. Right now would be a good moment to get some coffee, as this will take some time. As we can see in Task Manager, the macOS recovery which we are running in the virtual machine is now downloading all of the required files for macOS Sequoia, and that is quite a lot to get. After some time, when everything is downloaded, the installer will shift to unpacking and installation. In my case, the download part took roughly 13 minutes, but this heavily depends on your internet connection speed, of course. During the second phase now, we can see that instead of networking, the CPU load and disk utilization gets a lot higher, which makes sense. Finally, after quite a bit of more patience, you should see the Select Your Country or Region dialog. Again, this is exactly the same as on a real Mac. Between starting the installation, after selecting the drive and then clicking Continue, and this screen, in my case, this took about 35 minutes. Let us close Task Manager now and focus on the virtual machine again. Select your country or region here, and then continue to answer the rest of the questions. You might notice straight away that the performance, or at least how it feels and how smooth the mouse pointer moves, is not very good. Don't worry too much about that, as we'll still fix this later. After completing the initial setup, we can click Continue, and we end up in our virtual macOS installation. Let's take a quick look at About This Mac now first. Here we can see part of that virtual machine hardware which we configured in the VMX file. Okay, we do have a working version of macOS Sequoia up and running in a virtual machine now, but with a few small extra steps, we can make this experience a lot better. For that, we will need to install the VMware tools. That can't be done directly in VMware Workstation, unfortunately, so we will need to download these manually instead. Go to the link provided again in the description, which will bring you to the download page for these tools on the Broadcom website. If required, log in again using the same account. As there are no version 12 tools for macOS, we need to select VMware Tools 11.x here in the list. Choose the latest version, and as with the download of VMware Workstation itself, it's possible that you still need to accept some license terms. Then look for Darwin on this page, which will point you to the VMware Tools package for macOS. From here, download the zip version. Once downloaded, navigate to the Downloads folder again and extract that downloaded zip file. Now we need to go back to the virtual machine, right-click on the name of the VM, choose Removable Devices, CD/DVD, Settings. Here we need to choose to use an ISO image and then browse to the extracted files in the download folder. In there, you should find a file called darwin.iso under the VM Tools subfolder. Make sure to connect the drive and then click OK. After a few seconds, you should see a pop-up titled VMware Tools in the VM now. Double-click on Install VMware Tools and follow through the installation wizard. This will ask for our user's password and request some additional permissions. Due to the default security settings, the system extension which the tools try to install is blocked. So click on Open System Settings and allow that extension to be loaded. When asked, don't restart the system yet, as the installation always seems to fail on the first time, even when allowing the system extension to be installed. To overcome this, just rerun the same install VMware Tools and go through the same steps. This time, the installation should work as expected, and to complete it, we can now restart our virtual machine. Okay, we are back in macOS, and everything looks the same at first glance, but you will probably notice straight away that everything feels a lot more smooth in comparison with before. Looking at About This Mac also no longer shows us only 3 MB for graphics now. Talking about graphics, since we have the VMware Tools extension loaded, we can also change the resolution now, which was not possible before. You can either drag and resize the size of the VMware Workstation window, or if you want to set a specific resolution, open the terminal window and type the following command. The values on the end here can be adjusted to the horizontal and vertical resolution of your choice. Now, after entering our user's password, you can see that this is configured as requested. One last task before we can start enjoying macOS is to unlink that BaseSystem VMDK file from our VM. We no longer need that, and it just feels more clean. To do so, let's start by shutting down macOS. Once the VM is shut down, we can now click on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. Select the hard drive, which is about 3 GB in size, which we added earlier and represents that VMDK file on the desktop, and then click Remove. The file can be reused in the future for another machine if desired, or it can just be deleted as this virtual machine no longer needs it to function. Another handy feature provided by the VMware Tools which we just installed is a shared folder. This will allow you to easily exchange files between the Windows host and macOS guest. Let's enable this by going to Options here, click on Shared Folder and choose for Always Enabled. We can add a folder and browse to an existing folder or just create a new one, like I'm doing on the desktop. Then click on OK to save these settings and power up the VM again. To access this shared folder now from macOS, we can go to Finder and click on Go, Computer. In here, you can now see VMware shared folders, and after opening that, the newly created folder is there in the list. Right now, it's still empty, but if you put a file in there, for example by downloading the static Sequoia wallpaper to this folder, and we refresh it from macOS, we can just use this file as any other. If desired, we can also run the virtual machine full screen, which makes the experience even more real, if you can call it that way. To conclude the video, let me also run some benchmarks on here. As you can already see, when I'm downloading these benchmarks, the virtual machine is far from slow. Web pages open quickly, and the UI in general reacts fast and things do feel smooth. One large performance-related disadvantage, though, is that there is no 3D acceleration available in the VM. That's also the reason why that dynamic wallpaper wasn't displayed earlier. This does bring quite a lot of limitations to the use cases for this, but it shouldn't spoil all the fun. I started to run Geekbench 5 in here, and as a result, we're getting 1601 single-core and 4706 multi-core. Not bad at all, especially if you see how little that single-core score is less than what came out of this machine natively. Doing the same with Geekbench 6 results in 2133 and 5532. Again, not bad at all, and faster than a heavily upgraded Mac Pro 5.1 or even a MacBook Pro late 2019. At least if we don't count in the penalty we get from the lack of 3D acceleration, that is. That was it for the video. As you could see, this process got quite a bit faster without the need for that intermediate step. Performance is not too bad, and although the use cases for this are rather limited, it allows you some great flexibility to explore macOS or to test out and repair or recover some things. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Let me know if you went through this process, how it worked for you, or if you have any questions in the comments. And if you like these kind of videos, make sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. Thanks again, and hope to see you back here soon.